Hello and good morning, friends. Welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, as you know that from time to time we talk on different subjects, we talk on different topics under those subjects. So dear friends, I would like to tell you all that in today's session we are going to have a deep insight into Shakespeare's King Lear, and for this we have again with us in our studios Professor Anand Prakash. Professor Anand Prakash is a retired professor from the Department of English, University of Delhi, and with the help of these EduSet platforms, these EduSet lectures, he keeps on enlightening us with the help of his experience, and I hope that all the students who watch our lectures would appreciate our lectures, and through your feedback it becomes convenient for us to know what kind of lectures you wanted. So without wasting any time, I would like to welcome our guest, Professor Anand Prakash, and let's under his able guidance, let's understand about Shakespeare's King Lear. Hello sir, welcome to the EduSet lecture.
Thank you, Geetika, for your kind words, and welcome viewers. And today we discuss Shakespeare's King Lear, arguably the strongest, the most effective play that Shakespeare wrote. I say arguably because Shakespeare, the master craftsman and dramatist, wrote a large number of plays, and people have opinions which clash with the opinions of others, and everybody has one's own favorite play of Shakespeare. This play I would characterize as a very stark play. It doesn't go into nuances. It doesn't go into layers. It doesn't suggest this and that. It doesn't mix up things. It very clearly shares with the reader and the viewer the perspective that Shakespeare is presenting, and the viewer always has choices to make, and since the choices are tough, therefore the play is very heavy in that sense. Not that it's not a gripping play, it's a very gripping play. In fact, this engages the attention at a different level, but then the content is so vast that the very content will put this play in the category of important works. It's not a play about individuals. It's not a play about love. It's not a play about nature. It's not a play about morality. It's a play about a country, a nation which is facing some kind of a disruption and disintegration. And when countries, communities face this kind of a prospect, then everybody looks at the scenario presented in the play on the stage with that kind of gravity. So I call this play very stark, and I immediately go back as I start considering this play to the times when Shakespeare felt like going into the subject of politics, of society, of disintegration, of disloyalty, and all other big concerns. And as I would have told you in the other discussions also regarding Shakespeare, the most productive phase of Shakespeare was the years that came at the turn of the century. Let's say 1598 to 1604 or 5, and to these 5 or 6 years, this play belongs. Some people may say that this is at the center of those plays. And England is moving from stability to instability in politics and society. It has been a very stable country during the 16th century, but as the century closes and Shakespeare enters the dramatic scene in England in the last decade of the 16th century, then he watches a kind of movement of time from stability and certainty to instability and uncertainty. And he tries many methods to come to terms with the reality of the time. He uses, for instance, the comic method. He uses the history method. He uses the tragedy method now, and later on he'll make more experiments. He does so by changing modes, etc., because he wants to understand the crux of the matter that humanity of England in general is facing at the time. So these are the difficult times. People are becoming more and more aware about the matters of not merely ordinary things, but of the matters of the state. and there is scarcity in the country. There might have been crop failures in the 1950s, because of which people start asking for food, asking for corn, and they sometimes got together. In those times, they were not democratic times; they were the times of monarchy. In those times, people are coming out from their villages, from their suburban areas, from the urban areas, from their homes, gathering on the street and protesting, and sometimes fighting with the police and the army. So this is the kind of situation that Shakespeare witnessed in the last decade of the 16th century, and these people who came to protest, came to question, came to ask all kinds of things from the governing authority of the day. This made people to think, and people themselves raised questions which would have a long kind of implication, and who knows what may happen after the people have started intervening in the affairs of the state. So this is the kind of thing that Shakespeare is confronted with, and then he takes up certain stories, certain folk tales, etc. He reworks them. He puts some new characters and keeps some old characters, and he weaves a plot. He weaves a kind of a structure in the play, and then he engages the attention of the viewer, keeping in mind the interests and the causes of the day. So in this context, this play is written. Now, I will divide my discussion of King Lear into several parts, and I'll go taking one part after another. And the first thing that comes to my mind is that in this play, the plot is very important. Now, this plot is a very problematic concept in Shakespeare criticism, and some people like A.C. Bradley in the beginning of the 20th century, they started adopting Aristotelian concepts of understanding a play. And in Aristotle, the main focus is given to the plot. I don't say that with plot you can do justice to the play entirely, but then as a working kind of a tool to analyze a text, one can use the concept of the plot. So what does the plot say? The plot says very clearly that things are uncertain in the beginning, then the king takes a step. It's an extreme step he is taking. He's abjuring. He's leaving the throne into the hands of the younger generation, and then he's going away. He'll live in seclusion. He will just have a kind of private life. He will not interfere in the matters of the state. And when that happens, it's not an ordinary thing. In a country that willingly the king leaves his office and gives it to his family members, and as chance has it, the king doesn't have sons. The king has only daughters, and there are 3 daughters in the play, and the country is to be divided into 3 parts, so that each daughter can take a part and govern it with her lights, with her talent and intelligence. Now this is very tricky. Let me tell you right in the beginning that when the plot starts with the kind of a division of the country, then Shakespeare perhaps has in mind not merely the historical fact of a country being divided much earlier in time. Maybe it's the 8th or 9th century in England when this kind of a thing would have happened. England was not one country till the Tudors came in the 15th century. So the country was divided into different parts, but then from the Tudor dynasty coming in and taking care of the affairs of the state from, let's say, exactly 1487 onwards up to the 1600 or even later, the country remains one. And this one country all the time feels the threat of division, but it doesn't divide so far. So Shakespeare takes it into his hands and into his imaginative area, the crux of dividing a country. And how does one feel when one sees that one's country is being divided just in front of oneself? So there is an audience. Imagine an audience in England in let's say 1603 or 1604 when the play is presented on the stage. that a king comes, of course, now there is a reference to England in this. The play is based in England. And the king comes and he spreads a map in front of him. He starts saying, okay, this river, this valley, these trees, these forests, these towns, etc. This is what constitutes England. And then he is going to divide the country. How would the audience, feel, in their heart of hearts when a king takes upon himself, the responsibility of dividing a country into three parts? So it's a very explosive kind of point that Shakespeare is making, and this explosive point is presented with the kind of gravity that is required to do so. So people would definitely be stunned into silence when they saw that the idea of dividing England into three parts was being sold by the writer from the stage, and in fact the writer would be warning also, administering a kind of warning to the audience that the country is being divided like this, and the country has with his whims and fancies, he is telling the daughters to take specific parts. He's not asking their choice. Already he has done the work, his homework. He comes prepared to the throne on that particular day, to the court, to say that there are parts and these parts are specific, and he has made up his mind regarding which daughter will assume the role of governing which part in England at that time. So one sees, it's a very shocking thing, and Shakespeare wants to, shock the audience out of their wits, so that the seriousness and the dangerous aspect of dividing a country is visualized in full detail. So I have gone a little out of the play into the English background just to tell you that Shakespeare would engage the attention this way, that he would completely have the audience in his grip. Then he would pose questions to them, and the basic question that's being posed is that the country is at the threshold of division, at the threshold of some kind of a disaster, and that from this disaster the many more things will finally emerge, and those things would be very daunting. They would be very dangerous, and it's not merely awe-inspiring. People would not know how to tackle the kind of situation that Shakespeare is unfolding before the audience at the time. So I say, with this kind of beginning, it's a beginning which one finds very rarely, in a play, in a book of fiction even, where this kind of prospect is presented, as I already told you. Now, if the play begins with this, then it will go in a certain direction, and the people who own the parts and govern and manage those parts, their behavior will be under watch, will be in focus, and as it comes out in the plot, there are two daughters who are given very, very important important parts of the country, and there is a third daughter who, right in the beginning, in the first scene, decides against assuming the role of an owner of a part, because she says to the king that she likes him as much as a daughter should like one's father. Now, it's a silly question that the king asked in the beginning, the first scene. He said, "How much do you love?" Asked the first daughter, and she says, I like you more than this, more than that, etc. I like you more than my eyes. And then he goes to the second daughter and says, "How do you like me?" So one realizes that the country is perhaps not, the king of the country is not in his senses, that he's asking such a silly question right in the beginning. "How much do you like me?" And the daughter is supposed to say, "Well, I like you very much," and therefore it's okay, then have a gift from me. When he goes and asks, goes towards when he looks at the third daughter and asks her the same question, then she's a sincere person. She takes the question seriously. She says, "Okay, I like you very much," and the king, of course, knows that she is his favorite daughter, and he's expecting a very good answer from her, a kind of poem written in his praise, let's say, and she disturbs him no end by saying, well, she likes him very much, but only to the extent that daughter should like, and she can't like him entirely, because there are other likings, that there are other relationships, that there are other attachments that she will have in life. After all, she is going to marry very soon, and there are suitors at the door in the country, and she has to choose one of the suitors, or the suitor has to choose her as a future wife. So she says, well, love is cannot be divided, but then that there are parts of one's attention that one can think of giving to one or the other person, and she will like her father, at the same time she will like her husband also, and who knows, maybe later on she likes also the children, and she has friends also. So this question of kind of attachment that a person may have with a father, with a daughter, with a husband, etc., this also is introduced in the beginning of the play itself. And the third daughter refuses entirely to meet the expectations of the father, with the result that the father is angry. And he says, okay, in that case, he will not give the third part of England to her. Imagine now, this is a silly aspect of the king that emerges in the first part of the play, in the first scene of the play. But look at it from the father's angle. The father is an old man. He calls himself more than 80 years. He doesn't have control over his senses. He doesn't have control over his mind. And he is a very indulgent kind of person. And there are references to his past also, that he has been very impulsive in his life. Consider this kind of a father. And then, he is very indulgent towards his third daughter, the youngest, the most innocent, and a woman who represents, good points of behavior, virtue, ethics, etc. He likes her immensely, and he wants her to praise him on that particular day. As you know, one praises, one wants praise on the day of one's birthday. So it's a kind of leave. He's bidding kind of farewell to the country, and he wants some kind of a praise. Now, I don't think there is anything wrong or right in this, but then Shakespeare is using this particular occasion to emphasize the honesty of the third daughter and the dishonesty, and the double standards of the first two daughters. And well, the tragedy is definitely going to happen. It's a tragedy. The play is a tragedy, and the tragedy is going to happen with this, that the people who are who are not sure about delivering goods to the country, who will not meet the requirements of the country's expectations, those people are given the reins of the country. And the third one is very sincere, very spontaneous, not exactly spontaneous, very sincere and well-meaning, and believing in all that one does, and a very virtuous person. This person tells the truth and is punished for telling the truth. And the king says, okay, in that case, you lose the right to your third part, and I'll divide this third part into two and give one part each to the two daughters whom he has already given their specified parts earlier. So this is how the play begins, and the first scene is a very shocking scene, and the scene, as I said, raises a large number of questions, and the questions relate first to the kind of governance that is expected from the young generation. And one also thinks that if the king was impulsive in his youth, he was impulsive in his adulthood and later, and at the end, he makes this kind of a choice regarding leaving the throne. Then one can look towards the youngsters, the younger generation, and one can expect that they will be good. But then in the first scene itself, Shakespeare has made it very clear that the two daughters who have got the share of the entire country between themselves, these two daughters definitely will not meet the expectations either of the king or of the people who are supposed to be governed. So this is how the play opens, and I use the word tragedy for the play. It starts as a tragedy, but there is a very interesting point. I think I made it in passing in the earlier discussions also, that most of the plays in Shakespeare's time were called not comedies or tragedies or what, they were all called histories, and even this play is called a history. In 1598, when the first printing is done, then it's called the History of King Lear. Later on, it's changed to the Tragedy of King Lear. So one's mind, goes to this also, whether it's a tragedy or a history. And if you ask this question from me, if I ask this question from myself, I would say that in Shakespeare's time, history didn't have the same kind of meaning as it has today. History would definitely mean the account, the time that was associated with a person at a particular moment, and that time was supposed to be the history of the person. This is how the person came up, this is how the person grew up intellectually, socially, politically, etc. And this is how the person finally came to the point of solution, or the point of complicating the questions further. This is how the plot will go from one part to another and finally come to a kind of resolution. So when the plot is like this, that it's an account of Lear, then it's history of Lear. But then if you go into the theme, if you go into the pleasure part, pleasure within quotes, because sometimes tragedies are never pleasurable. But on the stage, when one watches a tragedy, when one faces questions, one becomes sentimental, emotional, angry, disappointed, etc. Then one starts enjoying those emotions. So there is a kind of a pleasure even in tragedy. So this tragedy happens and people cry, and when they cry, they feel light. In life, when they cry, also the tears have this kind of a part. So people like a play because the play raises questions, and the eyes of the audience become misty. So in the 16th and 17th centuries, when Shakespeare wrote these plays, then they were greatly popular. In fact, Shakespeare is known for his tragedies, and one can call this play not merely a history play. It's not a history play. It's called a History of King Lear, but then it's also a tragedy. And as a tragedy, if you see, then the first scene lays a proper background for this tragedy to happen. Now the country cannot see good times, because the people who have assumed the power, the political power in the country, these people will not be able to govern the country according to the laws and principles that satisfy the subjects at the time. So two things have happened right in the beginning. The country is divided. Second, that the country has gone into the hands of those who are, by all standards, wild characters. Characters who are clever, who are self-centered, who are cynical. And from this I go to the next sub points regarding the beginning, that one realizes very soon in the first act of the play itself, that the division in this particular play is very neat. There are no grey characters in this play. It's very rare, that Shakespeare doesn't present grey characters. I'll discuss, maybe Macbeth later, and one doesn't know whether to like Macbeth or to dislike him. He's both. He's a likable person, at the same time he is to be criticized, and you start hating him. You feel disgusted with him. You feel angry with him. So there are lots of shades of grey in Macbeth, for instance. But when this play comes, then there is no shade of grey. Either characters are white or they are black. For instance, I can tell you this neat division in the play. The neat division is that good characters constitute King Lear himself. He is well-meaning, he is a father figure, and he will always remain like this. All fathers are very indulgent. All fathers are also prone to certain mistakes, because they live life on a grand scale, and they have to think of the interests of the whole family. So they can be indulgent, they can be favoring some people at the cost of others. So Lear is a white character. Kent, his servant, a lord, but his servant is a very fine person and very loyal, and he will give everything for the safety of the king, and in dire circumstances. Then you have Gloucester. Gloucester will be a loyalist himself. Then you have Edgar, Gloucester's son. He's also a picture of courtesy and a picture of correct behavior. And then you have the third daughter, Cordelia, who is the symbol of virtue and honesty in the play. So you have all these characters on one side of the play, and these are ranged against They are being consistently opposed by, at the level of behavior, as well as at the level of projecting values. There are characters who are just the opposite, and these characters are the two daughters of King Lear, Goneril and Regan. They disappoint the king. They go against him. They are very callous. They treat their father very cynically, very cruelly, and they go back on their words. They make promises which are always false, and you have their husbands who follow them, who agree with them, who are a part of the schemes that their daughters hatch. Then you have Edmund. Edmund is the son of Gloucester, and he's a bastard child. And there are lots of issues that Shakespeare raises regarding his upbringing, regarding his morality, regarding his notion of good and bad. He is a very powerful character, but if somebody is supposed to be a villain, then you have a villain apart from the two daughters in Edmund. So you have on one side the white characters, and on the other side the black characters, and there is nobody in between. The whole society, the whole upper segment of society is divided into these two categories. Who will win? As a viewer, we are supposed to ask this question sitting in the hall where we watch the play. We start wondering right in the beginning. The country has gone into wrong hands. Who will win? Obviously, the wrong people will win. Who will lose? All the good ones will lose. Will it continue? Well, if you go into the dynamics of the play, if you know the characteristics of different parts in the play, if you know the characters, if you know the situations, if you know the concerns that they have, then you realize that in such a scenario, the bad people will win and the good people will lose. Obviously, inexorably, you can't stop it. Inexorably, it is going towards doom. And if finally doom occurs, then it's a tragedy. So it's a full-fledged, powerful tragedy of a society, of a family, of a certain segment of society, when the king, when the court, when the nobles, when the upper classes, they are divided like this, and good people among the upper classes lose, and the upper classes are supposed to, rule the country. Then one can imagine the plight of the ordinary people in the country. So it's going towards doom without fail, inevitably, and there is a fate-like agency that seems to be working in the play. The fate has decided that the country will finally go towards doom. That's how the plot is realized. Now, is it a good plot or a bad plot? Is it a plot that people would like to see, unfolding itself before their eyes or not? Would they relate to this plot? These are the questions that Shakespeare would be facing, and we also face these questions. And if it's a total tragedy and a fate is there, then the play cannot perhaps sustain interest for a long time. And this play does sustain interest, so there is a problem. So shall we call it a tragedy, or shall we call it a realistic play? Tragedy also can be realistic, and realism can also be tragic. So I'm not making any kind of a neat separation of the two. But if you look at it realistically, then you would find that the bad people will continue being bad. Maybe they'll go from bad to worse, but the good people will also give a fight. So when the play ends in some kind of a disaster, and when no good people are finally left with the audience, then also the audience can go back to the powerful resistance that the good people gave to the bad people. So this emotion of resistance, this emotion of not accepting whatever came as bad, this gives strength to the audience to imagine that later on perhaps these people will succeed in different circumstances. And Shakespeare actually thrives on, as a writer of tragedy, he thrives on this kind of realism, that even though things are bad, even though things are difficult to handle, people do not stop struggling against them, and they die fighting. And in this play, you will see that people will die fighting right in the beginning, right in the first act, and later you find that there are characters who don't bother about the physical safety, and you punish them, you hit them, you kill them, etc., and they don't mind, because they say this is unjust, and we are going to take our step against it. So you have this kind of a plot, and it is this which makes this a play great, that people keep on fighting for those values which they cherish in life. When from here, I've already talked to you about the plot, the way things begin, the way they finally develop, the way the way in which they end, and in the play. This was the plot movement. Then I also talked about characters which are neatly divided, and the bad characters, the evil characters, the dark characters, they will hatch conspiracies to crush any kind of opposition. But then on their side, the good people will fight with their good qualities, deriving strength from them, and sustaining one another. And so far as Lear is concerned, Lear will not merely fight at this level. Lear will leave his palace. Lear will leave the court. Lear will become a different person, and later on nobody will recognize that this was the king once. He's an old man, old, decrepit, helpless man, walking the streets in a mad condition. That's what Lear will become. So imagine a king becoming semi-naked, moving around, almost begging, almost spending his time with beggars on the heath and elsewhere. This is the kind of scene that one is going to see. So Lear will then perhaps moves towards getting some kind of a strength from the company of the ordinary masses, and Shakespeare is giving this answer in a very subtle manner, even though it's a stark play. But then when Lear leaves the court and goes to the masses, when he lives with them, in fact, then he realizes that the actual humanity constitutes of these masses, who are poor, not for any fault of their own. They are poor just because the people who are rich, the people who are powerful, the people who are privileged, the people who own the land, the people who rule the country, those people have not done their job well. And king realizes, he himself is one, an ex-king, he realizes this, and then he starts knowing the worth of these ordinary people who don't get 2 meals a day, and who don't have a house to live in, and who spend their time only on the heath. And Lear, in his madness, realizes the reality, realizes the conditions of realizes the problems of the people. So can you think of a bigger paradox, viewers, than this, that a person when he was in his senses, he didn't understand anything in society, but when he became mad, then he left his state, went to the poor people, then he realized. So in madness one realizes. Actually the opposite should happen, that when one is intelligent, then one opens one's eyes and goes and recognizes, puts things together, has an abstract view, a longish view of things, and then reaches the conclusion. So then one is intelligent. But in Lear's case, the education has begun right in the beginning with a mistake, and that mistake made him mad. When he is mad, then he realizes that real power, real humanity, real sense of value comes not from the upper classes, the upper sections, but from the lower masses. So in madness is one wise, and when one is in one's senses, then one is foolish. In fact, it's not merely suggested in the play, it is also told very clearly again and again in the play that mad Lear is the wise Lear. The sane Lear was the foolish Lear. It is said again and again by characters. In fact, I cannot stop referring to that famous character in the play called Fool. The fool who is supposed to be a jester, the fool is supposed to entertain the king in the court. Whenever things are becoming heavy in the court, then the fool butts in and cracks a joke, and people start laughing. So there is a kind of an institution, of a fool being kept always next to the king or in the court. And we have a fool here, and the fool is not cracking jokes now. How can you crack jokes when the king himself is being ousted later on, thrown out of the doors of the palace? So the king follows him, and the fool follows the king, and there the fool starts telling the king all the truths that the king himself may not have realized. So the fool actually is talking reality. The fool is giving a running commentary on the affairs of the state, on the affairs of human behavior, of human conduct, and the king is the fool is telling the king as to where he has gone wrong. So the fool says to king, "You are actually the fool. I am not foolish." And the king has to hear him, because the king at that point of time is deprived of all his privileges, and he is not as sane as he was earlier. So you have a fool talking wisely in the play. The fool is the wisest person in the play, and the fool is gaining in wisdom by watching the behavior of the king, the king's two daughters, and others who surround him or who are away from him. Then I move to the question of concerns in the play. What does Shakespeare want to make us feel and think about? This is important, because Shakespeare is not writing a play merely to entertain the masses. He knows how to entertain. He is one of the greatest entertainers, in drama, in world drama. But then he entertains by bringing in issues and concerns all the time. What are the concerns of this play? Well, I can say that there are 2 or 3 concerns, and these concerns are very big concerns. These concerns move history. These concerns move society. What are the concerns? The first concern is Shakespeare is showing us the disintegration of polity. The old way, the country will not be governed. Rules will be changed. The old way, when the king was supposed to be the appointee and the deputy of God, now that is going to come into question. That is no more true. That the king is seen here, initially divesting himself of the powers, etc., but very soon being treated as an ordinary person. In fact, he is thrown out. He has become helpless. And when the new rulers come, King Lear was not all that bad, but when the rulers come, they are more conspirators. They are criminals, and these criminals have occupied the throne now in their own territory, and under them one is sure that the country will go haywire. There will be wars in the country, and people will fight for more and more privileges. So in that kind of a case, the country is losing grip over its polity. The political system, the institution of governance, that will come under attack, and if that comes under an attack, then anarchy rules. So one of the biggest questions that a society faces is the question of anarchy, where there is no rule, where there are no courts, where there are no ethics, where there is no convention, and people just the powerful ones just behave the way they want. And anarchy is one of the worst enemies of a society. And Shakespeare is concerned about this kind of anarchy. And I opened my discussion with reference to what England was facing in the 1590s. Now, anarchic prospects were there in England at that time. And when anarchy is there, then if people are on the streets, and when they are they have lost patience, and then when they want to take things in their own hands, then nobody is safe. So one requires a kind of a rule, even though it's a bad rule. So there are lots of things regarding this. I wouldn't want to go into the implications of anarchism and the opposite, but I would definitely say that the people at large are peace loving, and they take to anarchic ways only when the situation under peace does not satisfy them. But it doesn't take away from the idea that people are essentially peace loving. So it's a big concern, and sometimes people are confused, but when they come out of confusion, then they once again move towards peaceful adherence to the laws. And this is a question that King Lear is facing. King Lear, as a play by Shakespeare, is facing this question, and he's he's in a way providing a kind of education to the audience, and through the audience to the society. You know that you require a king who understands your problems, and you also require a king who can govern. If there is a king who is cynical, as the two daughters are going to be cynical with their husbands in tow, then that country will not be worth living in, and it will not give any scope to people for progress or for happiness. So this is a major concern of the play, and Shakespeare is keeping it always in focus. The second thing is family, disintegration of family. You require a family in which certain norms are adhered to, but for norms to adhere to, there should be filial pieties, there should be filial attachments. So the father should know his own office. The daughters or the sons should know also their own office. But for that to happen, the father should organize the family in such a manner that everybody remains, has a kind of gratefulness towards the father. Is that the case in the play? You read the play, in the course of reading the play, in the middle of it, you ask this question, and you realize that perhaps King Lear has not been a very good father. He didn't have time for spending with his daughters. All the time he was busy with this or that thing. This is all in the background, not that this is told, but then the way he behaves in the first scene shows that he has always listened to himself. He didn't give a chance to his daughters to grow up. That's why the elder two daughters didn't have any good qualities in them. He never sat with them perhaps. He never gave them the kind of affection that they needed. He always asked them to love him. How can you ask the young women to love you as their father if you do not sit with them, discuss with them, know their problems, and you have a kind of atmosphere in which they learn how to respect. So the daughters are fending for themselves, and maybe he was not a good father. You have the case of a lord called Gloucester in the play, the other family that is involved in the play, and Gloucester has a son, but he also has a bastard son, and the bastard son is called the natural son. What does it mean? It means that the legitimate son is not the natural son. The legitimate son is the socially sanctioned son, so who enjoys social sanction, that you have an arranged marriage, you produce a child, and that child is your responsibility. But then you also have a natural son. Natural means you would have gone to, as a male, you would have gone to another woman, and that was not allowed, ethically and morally. So you produced that child. The woman conceived that child from you in some kind of privacy, where people didn't know what was happening. So maybe one got pleasure out of that kind of sinfulness, but then that pleasure produced a child who would be called a natural child. So the very concept of nature is changing in the context of the family. He is not adhering to family norms, with the result that Edgar has always faced a kind of difficult situation in the family. He always has faced the question of preference. Why is it that the socially recognized son, the legitimate son, is getting all the favors, all the privileges, and not the bastard child? It's not the fault of the bastard child, and therefore the bastard child is more realistic in his understanding. You read the play and the way he talks, and he has become a bad person just because he has always suffered neglect. So who is responsible for the bad behavior, the evil genius of the bastard child? Not the bastard child himself, but the breaking of the norm at the family level. To this question, Shakespeare, of course, is not a moralist, he is a realist. So if somebody breaks the norms, then Shakespeare would point out that this can be the result of breaking of the norms, and it's a very big question. I think the institution of family is as important as the institution of the state, and the two come together, and there are certain principles that one has to follow. But within the family, well, Shakespeare, being a realist, also points out that if things are always fixed, in that case people would like to make experiments in them, and human beings being human beings, they can make mistakes, and when they make mistakes, then they create difficulties for themselves, and these difficulties can become assume proportions that are not expected by the people who participated in them. So, you see, there is a disintegration of family that occurs when you start breaking the norms. But if you don't break the norms, then you are not exactly a human being, because then you always crush your instincts and your impulses. So, where does one go? Shakespeare doesn't give any simple answer to this, but definitely says that when things speed up and then start moving in a different direction than the one prescribed for the institution, then of course all these implications emerge. So, you have these two aspects, disintegration of polity and disintegration of family at the center of it, at the center of the play, and when these two things happen, then it is bound to be a tragic play. The third concern that also is there in the play is that the epoch is coming to an end. That also is disintegrating. That was the epoch of being a king and remaining king till the end. And if the king did not die, if the king remained 80 or so, then he will lose hold over his senses, and he will not be able to govern the country properly. What should he do? Shakespeare is also indirectly suggesting the desirability of a king who will set things right. But this person who sets things right may not be in the family. He may be somewhere else. He may be the leader of men. So, will you allow any able person to come and assume the throne? You don't. In history, this has not happened till Shakespeare's time. This happens only in the 18th century and 19th century onwards in Europe, and in India, this happens only in the 20th century. That elected government comes to power, and that elected government makes policies. So, democracy is not the order of the day in Shakespeare's time. So, the epochs come to an end, and then they create their own disruptive, their own disruption, and that disruption is there, staring in the face of England, that England which Shakespeare is recreating on the stage, and that is the theme. So, I really admire this play for raising these very big questions. He is not raising questions of ordinary things like you see in today's literature. He is raising these questions that affect the entire state, the entire country. So, I repeat, the three disintegrations that are happening in this play are the disintegration of the political system, the polity, the family, and the epoch. And since the epoch is entering, the epoch is coming to an end, and a new epoch has not exactly emerged on the horizon. Therefore, one is entering what can be called the area of darkness, and this play, as a tragic play, is moving in that direction. I called the alternative paradigm the area of darkness. That if the epoch is coming to an end and the new epoch is not showing any sign of hope, then where does one go? Now, this is the question: is Shakespeare suggesting that darkness is inevitable? Is he suggesting that? I partly answered this question earlier when I said that people fight against all odds even when they know that they are going to lose. So, is there actually an area of darkness? Well, Shakespeare, being a modest artist, an artist who looks as much inwards as he looks outwards, then he would say that things will unfold themselves later, but at the moment things are difficult. This is exactly what is there in England at the turn of the century, in 1600. The old system is finally coming to an end. Monarchy is not meeting the expectations of the masses, and no system is in sight at the moment. Maybe there will be a system after 40-50 years in England when Parliament will become strong, and one king will be replaced by the Parliament, and after being beheaded, after being killed. That will happen later. But then the premonition of the office of the king coming to an end has already emerged from the scene, and Shakespeare can see it in this play and in many other plays. Well, I'll viewers, since I'm reaching the end of the discussion, I'll just make one or two points briefly with you regarding this particular text in mind, and that is that, and I already touched upon this point earlier, that there is a symbol of storm in the play. It's called the storm scene. And when you reach that particular part where the storm is happening, there you realize that that storm is both real and metaphorical. Real in the sense that the characters in the play are visualized as facing a storm, and the symbolical, the metaphorical meaning is that the storm is not merely in nature, the storm also is there in society and in the lives of the human beings. And King Lear in that storm scene is without any help. He's alone, he is helpless, and he is definitely be overtaken by the fury of the storm, and he can't handle it. And that in the storm scene he will see reality much better than he would have seen when he was at the helm of affairs as a king in the country in the beginning of the play. So those who are interested in reading great poetry and reading very powerful depictions of the upheaval, they should refer to this storm scene in the play when King Lear is facing alone the fury of nature, and when he is talking to nature directly. And King Lear emerges as a very powerful force, as a kind of a god, as a kind of agency of some energy that can face the storm. In fact, there is a storm outside the king surrounding him, and there is also a storm raging within himself, in his own mind. The two storms meet, and therefore this play outdoes many other plays in what is called the powerful poetic aspect. The ending of the play, I would say that the ending is quite pessimistic, in the sense that there was a chance when the third daughter would have emerged victorious with her husband next to him, next to her, and the fight was going on, but finally she is captured and she is killed. And King Lear, who is himself mad, he holds the third daughter, who gave him shelter at the end, he holds her in his hands, and he uses those famous words on the stage, and there is a silence on the audience and on the stage, and he only utters one word 6 times or 5 times, and that word that he utters is never, 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 never. And around this time the play ends. And does Shakespeare use this word seriously? Of course he does. He takes it seriously, because in the 16th century these are the words that denote the kind of state in which people find themselves. But then the same play, King Lear, which is so very dark in its prospects of telling you the answer, the same play is modified at the level of plot and written again, not as a play this time, in the 19th century by another writer in France. And this time it is made a kind of a novel. And that novel is an example of human comedy. A great writer of France called Balzac, he writes a novel in the 19th century. Viewers, I am just telling you on the sides of this discussion that there is a novel by Balzac called Old Goriot. And in that novel, Old Goriot actually seems very much like King Lear in Shakespeare's play. And Old Goriot has 2 daughters, not 3 daughters, and those 2 daughters are as bad as the 2 daughters of King Lear. And the third one is missing. The third one, who was kind and nice and sweet, that daughter is missing. And there is a kind of Edgar also there in the play, but the play doesn't end as a tragedy. The novel doesn't end as a tragedy. So Old Goriot ends as a kind of human comedy. There is a chance. Balzac at the end says, well, these young people will sort out their own problems. They will work hard to get an answer to the questions that they face. He suggests, comically, that they will not do so, but they can. And on this note, Old Goriot ends. So what I say is that sometimes the particular moment of time in history, that moment is dark, but then that time in its intensity also shows some kind of a hope, which can later become a full source of light than merely a ray of hope. So with this particular point, I end this discussion today, and I hope viewers that you have seen the points in light of what I have said. Thank you.
With this note, thank you, sir. Thank you so very much. And in fact, I would say that you have raised a curiosity in me to read Shakespeare's King Lear, and soon I would be going to read this. And dear friends, if you are going to read this particular creation of Shakespeare, and then you have any queries which you would like to ask from Professor Anand, definitely for that you can mail us at info.cc@nic.in. We would love to solve your queries the next time when Professor Prakash visits our studio. Till then, take care, goodbye. We would be meeting again with one another creations and with one another topic. Thank you, sir. Thank you so very much.